these people who've been programmed and, as you say, in place and
Yes.
who are favorable to an opening with the Soviet concept, these are the very people who would be marked for extermination in this country?
Most of them, yes. Simply because the psychological shock when they will see in future what the beautiful society of equality and social justice means in practice, obviously they will revolt. They will be very unhappy, frustrated people, and the Marxist-Leninist regime does not tolerate these people. They will join the links of dissenters, dissidents.
Yes.
Unlike in present United States, there will be no place for dissent in future Marxist-Leninist America. Here you can get popular like Daniel Ellsberg and filthy rich like Jane Fonda for being dissident, for criticizing your Pentagon. In future, these people will be simply squashed like cockroaches. Nobody is going to pay them nothing for their beautiful, noble ideas of equality. This they don't understand, and it will be greatest shock for them, of course. The demoralization process in the United States is basically completed already. For the last 25 years, actually it's overfulfilled, because demoralization now reaches such areas where previously not even Comrade Andropov and all his experts would even dream of such a tremendous success. Most of it is done by Americans to Americans, thanks to lack of moral standards. As I mentioned before, exposure to true information does not matter anymore. A person who was demoralized is unable to assess true information. The facts tell nothing to him. Even if I shower him with information, with authentic proof, with documents, with pictures, even if I take him by force to the Soviet Union and show him concentration camp, he will refuse to believe it until he is going to receive a kick in his fat bottom. When a military boot crashes his balls, then he will understand, but not before that.
Wow, that was very interesting and very relevant to tonight's show, tonight's guest, and to where we are in the United States of America, probably pretty much for the rest of the world. So we are very honored, Mike and I are very honored to have G. Edward Griffin on the show. He's an author, a filmmaker, a lecturer. He wrote the book World Without Cancer, which I need to read that thing pretty quickly. Creature from Jekyll Island, about the Federal Reserve. We'll talk a little bit about that. Noah's Ark. He's also founder of Red Pill University. And before we hand it off, Mike, one thing that really caught my attention there about the true information, right? He's talking about true information. I've said this before. I feel that the American media, to me personally, is more dangerous than the Russian media, because people in America believe that it's an independent media and it's not controlled by the government like the Russian media and other medias in these communist countries. Therefore, they think it's not biased and they believe everything. In reality, it's being controlled to manipulate us, and it has some level of credibility that it doesn't deserve. So I think true information is very important. So with that said, let me pass it off to Mike, and then we'll jump in with our special guest.
Yes. Yeah. G. Edward Griffin's a personal hero of mine. I've probably given away 7 or 8 copies of your book. It's an absolute masterpiece, Creature from Jekyll Island. We talk a lot on this show about being awake as opposed to woke. I think you've probably done more throughout your life to wake up more people than you'll ever get credit for. Between your interview with Yuri Bezmenov, we played the short clip from in the open, the Creature from Jekyll Island, all the interviews that you've done over the years, everything you've done at Red Pill University, that you've really gotten to the core of a variety of the lies that are perpetrated across Americans, whether that's through our media and Operation Mockingbird, which I'm sure has never ended. It's just been renamed to something else. It's Operation Stool Pigeon now or something else. But you've been on target with the Federal Reserve, our currency, real medical advice, getting to the root of a lot of our problems, and cutting through the deceptions that people believe because they're convenient, and it's hard to go search for the truth on your own, especially when you learn the truth, and there are consequences to that. There are consequences to having your eyes open. They can't be closed again. But Mr. Griffin, welcome to our program. And if there's anything I missed, if you could let our audience know.
Well, you didn't miss very much. If you did, it probably wasn't worth talking about. Yeah, it's true that I have been on the ramparts for a long, long time, and I've seen. I used to say when I was young, I say I've seen it all, and then in later years I discovered that no, I hadn't seen hardly any of it yet. I just didn't know what I didn't know. In fact, that to make that statement, it just reminded me. I decided a few days ago or a week ago that I've never read Plato's Republic. I've read a lot of old ancient books, but I missed the Republic. So I ordered the book and I got it and I read it the other day, and I was astounded how much was in there. Not so much in the ability to figure out what's going on in the world today. First of all, I discovered that Plato was not what I thought he was. When I went to school, he was described to me as a philosopher, one of
Yes.
the original philosophers. Well, I guess it depends on how you define philosophy, but I was expecting wisdom to come from it. But instead, I found a lot of stuff that, in my opinion, was not really wisdom. I think Plato's real talent, and you have to give him credit for it, is to be a debater. He could debate almost anybody into a position that's 100% opposite to what they started with. And they called that philosophy because he would take ideas and begin to peel off the fine meanings of this and that. And so finally, you don't recognize the word. For example, if you said, well, we all agree that it's improper, it's immoral, it's unethical to kill another human being, right? Oh, yeah, everybody agrees that. Killing is bad. Well, not even in self-defense. If they're trying to kill you, wouldn't you be justified in killing another person to save your own life? Well, yeah, under those conditions, yeah. Well, then you found an exception.
Yeah.
Now, but what about it? What if this person, you weren't sure that he was going to kill you? What this thing about doubt? I mean, could you kill somebody just because you thought that they were going to kill you? Well, probably not. And if you start peeling away the argument, and that's what Plato is so good with. But the one thing, and the reason I mention all this is that the one thing that he said that just rang like a clear crystal bell. It went something. This is not his word, but my interpretation. He said, "Let's see, how can I phrase it down? The older I get, the more I know how much I don't know." It's that kind of a thing, The older I get, the smarter I get because I realize and I'm dumber than I thought I was. Well, that's what happens to you when the ages creep up on you. You look back over your life and you think, oh my gosh, all of the things that I used to believe as a young person, I have discovered most of them are completely wrong. I was being lied to. And the bigger the issue was, it seemed like the more likely it was that I was being lied to. For example, money. I know something about the Federal Reserve now, but when I started, I just thought it was a government agency. I thought those good government agents were there to protect me and my interests, and it was just the opposite of the truth. And then I discovered something about the medical profession. I thought that whole profession was about saving lives and healing people. And then I got into the field of cancer, and I realized what the truth really was. It was just the opposite of what I thought. It might have started off good, but not after technology crept into it. Now just in case you're wondering what it is, in my view, I have a little meme on my website. It shows a doctor in a white coat standing in front of a classroom of medical students, and the doctor's got his stethoscope, of course, around his neck, and a pointer. And he's pointing to the blackboard, and on the blackboard it says, lesson number 1. A patient cured is a lost customer.
Yeah.
You can laugh about it, but this I discovered late in life is actually the controlling mantra in the medical profession today, at least Western medicine. And you go to the more important issues are wars, money, loyalty to your country, and your country supposedly being defending liberty and not defending tyrants at all, but getting rid of tyrants and preserving liberty for the people. Once you realize that in most cases that was all propaganda, it was just the opposite of what we thought. And so then you come to I'm 93 now, and you think, well, what am I still missing? What am I still trusting in that is perhaps just the opposite of what I think? And that might be a good topic for us today, because I think that are a couple of things still in that category.
Yeah, I watched one of your interviews from August this year, and I agree with you 100%. Where you were basically telling people they have to move a little bit quicker. We don't have as much time to kind of fix the trajectory of where we're going, and as we said before the show, is like we're in a war. People don't know we're in a war. We're losing, and we have to get them. And we have to understand the seriousness of the war. I think I mean, because you've been around for such a long time, I think Americans got soft, right? They got
Yes.
comfortable. Each generation, our children, you want to do good for your children, of course, and I think that softened us, right? And it took away some of our fire and knowledge and understanding. And then everybody was brainwashed from the universities. I graduated high school in '79. I think it started right before. And all these guys are running our country now, or running corporations. And unless we get a handle on it and do something, I don't know what all the answers are. Maybe you could help us with some of them. But do we do something quickly? We've only got a Band-Aid because of Donald Trump right now. That's a Band-Aid, a temporary Band-Aid.
Well, I couldn't agree with you more. In fact, that is the issue of the day, I think, is the fact, well, there are several ways you can break this topic down. I like to do that to make it simple. When you grab hold of a topic that big, you could talk forever and not know where you started and where you ended. But it seems to me that that kind of a topic needs an answer of, well, what kind of war is it? And why is it different? Is it different? And what really is the difference? And then secondly, how does that impact us and what we can do to fight back? And then the third thing is take a good hard look at what we are doing and see if it fits our formula for what we think we should be doing. And in almost every case, I can guarantee you that when you get to that point, that's where it gets rough, because you think, oh my gosh, I've been doing the wrong thing all this time. I've been informing myself about the problem, but I haven't been doing anything really constructive about it except whining about it and telling others about it. What have I done actually to recapture the system?
Mm-hmm.
I just talked about that. We got to move. We got to do it fast. We're running out of time. Blah, 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 blah. That doesn't do any good. So anyway, that's the kind of things that I'm wrapping my mind around today in these days.
One of the things that woke me up is when my kids were heading in freshman year in high school, my twins. I've never been involved in politics. I've never been to a school board meeting. I showed up because of the forced masking by Pritzker. One of the moms, the August before my children started school, showed me the book Genderqueer with all those sexual materials in there. That's just disgusting. I actually thought she was lying. I had my son go to the library and take a picture of his phone and send it to me, and I was shocked. So I started aggressively fighting, against this. I can't get fathers. I blew up those posters from Genderqueer, big posters. I couldn't get any fathers to hold the posters while I confronted the school board. And so when I reflect back on that, and you're talking about the little time that we have, or we have to fight, we're in a war, right? If we can't get fathers to show up and defend their children at the school, how are they going to fight if we really need them to fight, right? You hear about, oh yeah, come to America. We got guns everywhere. I can't get a father to fill one seat to say porn doesn't belong in your own child's school, right? Because they're worried about their job, they're all these other things that they're worried about. So how are we really going to defend ourselves when the culture has changed so differently from the greatest generation to where we're at now? I don't know, like your opinion on that.
Well, the answer is very clear. We don't. We lose.
Yeah.
That's the whole crux of the matter. How do you get fathers to do that? Well, maybe you can't. Maybe you have to start looking for different fathers. That brings to mind one of the lessons that came very clear to me about midway in my journey is that I used to be very concerned about reaching out and convincing all the masses. We've got to convince everybody that what's going on, and we got to mobilize everybody.
That's what me and Mike think we're doing now. But go ahead, keep going.
Yeah, and then I got reading some history, and I realized gradually that all of the major events of history were written by 15% of the population at most, actually activists doing things, and that 15% was led by approximately 3%. That was my estimate numbers. Mm-hmm. Those were what we now would call the opinion leaders, the influencers. Mm-hmm. Sure. And those were led by about 1% of the population who were the thought leaders, the originators, the guys that, like you, probably you spend most of your life thinking and worrying and acting on these issues and creating kind of a leadership hub for the whole thing. So when you consider 15% of the population led by 3%, influenced by 1%, this is doable. And as a matter of fact, I believe that our thoughts and our ideas have already been accepted by more than 15% of the population. That part is already done, but we don't even know it, or most people don't know it. We still think we're alone because we still rely on our television boob tubes to tell us what reality is. And as long as we're looking at that picture, it looks like we've been taken over and lost long ago.
Yes.
Because, they have riots and people breaking windows. But what we don't realize is those same guys are in Philadelphia and Detroit and New York, and they're bussed around. There's probably there's a platoon or a small army of those guys, probably no more than a couple of thousand people that are doing all of this, led by 3%, led by 1%, a very few powerful and wealthy people. But looking at it through the television said, oh my gosh, the world has gone mad, So this is part of our obligation is to get people to come together face to face. And you can't win this war by sending emails to each other.
Right.
You've got to get out there where the action is.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And, I do think that things will get to a point, as we're kind of seeing in the UK right now, with people getting in the streets and finally taking action, realizing that this media narrative that we're all presented with, like you said, is a deception that's designed to make us think we're losing, to think we're out of touch with where most of our countrymen are. But we're starting to see that shift. I think here we're really starting to see it. I just watched earlier today where we've seen, the Democrats took another loss of 2.3 million registered voters since January. And people I don't think most people understand just how big that is when you look at how close some of these states are and realizing losing 200,000 voters from a blue state. Well, that might flip it. I do think we are starting to gain ground, but there are a lot of topics that we're not touching yet. We're not really addressing the underlying problem, even though we feel like we're starting to make some level of progress with taking our country back, getting us onto a better track. As you said earlier, Donald Trump is a Band-Aid. It's a stopgap. 4 years is not enough time to fix everything that's wrong with our country. Realistically, we probably need somewhere between 10 and 20 years to get everything realigned monetarily, constitutionally, and even morally. That it's going to take more than 1 or 2 presidential cycles. But I do think more people are waking up to the truth and the reality. More people do understand, the Federal Reserve is about as Federal Express, that it's a banking cartel, that our medical industrial complex is there to line people's pockets, whether that's the pharmaceutical industry or the doctors. They're not there to cure people or make them better. They're there to make them dependent. So they are a lifelong customer. I think more people are waking up to these realities after COVID and seeing what our kids are being taught in the classrooms, and then all the rabbit holes that leads to. So I think we are on a better track than we were, but you're right, we're not there quite yet.
So I know Mike is chomping on the bit about the Federal Reserve because that's a passion of his. I know he's pivoting into that. So why don't we jump into the Federal Reserve? I also saw in your interview talking about crypto. So please, talk a little bit about the Federal Reserve and the corruption and, what it's involved and how you were awakened when you did research on it. And then explain the dangers of crypto that I saw you talking about in your last show or whatever show it was back in August.
Okay, well, that is a good pivot. But before I take that pivot, I want to connect the two, that and what we just talked about a moment ago, or you were mentioning that a sign of the awakening is to be measured by people getting active and in the streets. Well, that's just a minor thing. The real action is to get active, but not in the streets. That's not where it's happening. It's happening in the institutions, the political parties, the schools, the media systems. NGO. That's where we have to be active. We need to go to the streets and make our presence known. We've got to make an impression on the thinking process of the general public. But that's not where the battle is being waged. It's being waged in the institutions that we depend on for leadership. It's the political parties, it's the government agencies, it's the authorities that we respect as being good guys and pretending to be good guys. And then that leads us to the question, which I'd like to talk about later after the Federal Reserve, is that who are the good guys, really?
Right.
How do we measure who are the good guys and who are the bad guys? Is that all we have to say is, well, we don't like those guys? We don't like what they say, we don't like what they do? do we ever talk about principles?
Mm-hmm.
And the answer is no.
No.
And that's where we lose the war. We have no principles. We just want the good guys to be in charge and let the good guys do all the bad things, and it'll be all right. That's kind of what we're going through. So anyway, get back. I'll come back to that later. But let's deal with the Federal Reserve System. I think the Federal Reserve System has to be viewed at a little higher elevation than ground level. If you go up a little bit, say 10,000, 20,000 feet, and look down at it, the Federal Reserve System, of course, as you fellows know, is not a government agency. Probably most of your listeners know that by now. But most people out there,
I don't think that's true. I don't. Honest to God, I don't think people actually. I mean, honestly, I grew up southwest side of Chicago, so you need to do a Federal Reserve for Dummies.
Okay, well, we're all dummies. We all start off that way. I sure did, and I thought when I started this project years ago that the Federal Reserve was a government agency because they go to great length to appear that way, and of course they have the power of law behind them. If you don't follow the rules and regulations and directives established by the Federal Reserve System, you can go to prison or you can have your property confiscated legally. So who can do that? Government, right? So this must be a government agency. Well, see, that's part of the deception. This is the kind of warfare we're in right now. It's all deception. Yes. So the truth of the matter is that it's a private cartel, like a banana cartel or oil cartel. It happens to be a banking cartel, a group of independent, very large but independent bank industries or families in some cases, and they on the surface appear to be competitors, which technically they are, but they agree to work together to avoid or to minimize the competition so they can charge more for their products and services and not be worried about additional competition creeping into the picture. So they work out these cartel agreements between each other to fix prices and share products and make the rules and regulations for their own industry, and then to sell it to the gum-chewing public in such a way that the public says, "Oh, that's wonderful what they're doing. They're really protecting us, aren't they?" Yeah. And listen to them talk. They seem so concerned about inflation. I'm glad to hear that because I've thought for a while they didn't care, which they don't. They're the creators of it, but they have to talk about it, And that's this theme that comes up. You can't always depend on what you hear from people at the top. They're very good actors. Some of them are extremely good. And but that's hard to accept. We think, well, they're at the top, they're authorities. We have to respect authority because that's what we were taught in school. And if you're a good kid, you respect authority. However, so be it. Back to the Fed. So it's a cartel, which means it's a group of the biggest banks in America, and they're aligned very closely with the biggest banks in other countries as well through the the Bank of International Settlements in Switzerland. And that's really the hub of the whole thing. We have to look at it. When we go up to that 20,000-foot elevation, we see the Fed is merely a part of a global network of very, very powerful banking syndicates. And they work together for the purposes of their own. They have no interest whatsoever in what you or I think about it.
Let me guess. And some of these individuals that you're talking about are integrated into the World Economic Forum, or at least part of it, or relationships or collaborators.
Well, yes, I think most of those people at the WEP are integrated, as you say, but they're not really the movers and shakers. The ones at the top that draw those people in, who invites those people to join. That's you have to look for the group that says who gets to get into the WEP. And that's a little committee of maybe 4 people. Okay. Yes. And the rest are just, they're dupes like everybody else, but they're just at the higher level.
Could you name those 4 people for us?
Well, let's climb all the way to the top. And I have to say, I don't really know all the names, although some of them are quite discoverable. Yeah. If you go to the tops of the boards of directors or the corporate structures of most of the big banking systems, J.P. Morgan Company and the Rockefeller Interest, it's not hard to find the names. But we know that the 2 at the very top globally are the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers. And now you get to some of the, the others like the Morgans. The Morgans are gone, but now it's a corporate thing, and we don't even know the names of these people. Not too important, because there are levels above them too. And this is what I want to really talk about when we get to it a little bit later. This is a highly structured thing that we've been living under it and didn't see it because it's invisible and nobody talks about it. And it's like so many things, it could be practically in your face, but if you don't talk about it, you don't pay any attention to it, So back to let's start with the Fed. That was the question. I think that the people that control the Fed were well aware years ago, decades ago, that this Ponzi scheme that they were doing by creating money and lending it into existence and collecting interest on literally nothing that they had put into the kitty, just making money out of nothing except debt, that it was a Ponzi scheme, creating purchasing power without a comparable increase in assets. Naturally, the prices of things is going to go up, and that means that the average man is paying a hidden tax called inflation. So there, in a nutshell, is the whole scheme of this thing. So these guys knew decades ago that couldn't continue forever. And so they've been talking I discovered the first mention of it in some of these old books that are well over 100 years old. They're talking about the cashless society. That was the ultimate dream of these people, the international banking fraternity, if you want to call it something, or cartel. Sure. They wanted a cashless society. Well, that seems strange to the casual observer. Banks deal in cash, don't they? Mm-hmm. And if you get rid of cash, what happens to the banks? Well, that's what they're telling us what happens to the banks right now. They're proposing it. If you listen carefully, they're going to take all the money out of our pockets and out of our banking accounts and all out of the mattress and out of the tin cans buried in the backyard and all the coins on top of our dresser. And there will be no money, tangible money at all. It'll all be that wonderful thing called digital currency. Isn't that so wonderful? They've been trying to get us to think that. That's been their dream for hundreds of years. Because if it's cashless society, you and I have no ownership over it. Only Correct. If they say we will. Let's just imagine that we open up our computer and we say, well, I wonder how many tokens or units or whatever they call it I have in my account. Oh, look at that, 7,500. Man, I'm good to go. And you go have lunch and you come back and you turn on the computer and what happened? What? It's zero. It's zero. What happened to it? I didn't take it out. Oh, and then you get a notice on another email. We didn't like your what you said on YouTube the other day. That was misinformation. And we think you might even be a domestic terrorist. And naturally, we can't let you function in our society. And you no longer have money. It's just like that. That's what they're working toward. In other words, to say it in another way, this banking cabal, that's the word I like to use, has always been interested in control over human population. And money was the only reason they wanted money is because that was the path to control over the human population. That was how you do it. Now, if you can do it without cash, it's even better. Mm-hmm. And that's what they're working toward. They want control, total mastery over every human being on this planet, and that they're going to get it if they can by removing our money supply. And they're going to do that with what they call digital currencies or stable coins or something like that. And we're going to be so happy to get it at the beginning because we've been told, right now we're being told it's going to solve all of our problems. And it won't.
Exactly. And central bank digital currency, or as I like to call it, digital dollary dues, that's their ultimate goal. Because then it isn't just a matter of controlling your money, as you alluded to, Mr. Griffin. It's about controlling your actions, especially if, say, we have, a digital ID. Let's say that's tied to your vaccine passport and your international passport and everything else you do. Maybe you're tied in to a 15-minute city where if you go beyond the range that they allow you to go, or maybe you drive an extra day, suddenly your money's shut off. Maybe you went to that restaurant earlier and you ordered too much meat, and now they're not going to let you order anymore or buy any more at the grocery store, they're going to turn off that feature on your money because you're over your allotment. We're already seeing in the UK and parts of Europe that they're now putting carbon amounts on food you buy at the grocery store. Well, they're not doing that for fun. They're doing that to train people for what's coming. You know, that's really what it's all about, is controlling your every action, where you go, what you say. Again, we have this rolling out in Europe right now with these Online Safety Act, getting people to enter their ID on everything. So now they know everything you say online. We're seeing somewhere between 30 and 200 people arrested per day in the UK right now for not having the right opinion. And this will roll out. This will be something, as you alluded to, they will shut off your digital currency, your ability to buy and sell. And it'll probably go beyond that too. You know, if you're using your air conditioner too much in the summer, maybe they'll use your smart thermometer and shut off your ability to do that. We already saw that happen in Colorado, Texas, and I always forget the third state here in the U.S. a few years ago. Now, people flipped out, so they only did it a few times, but this is all on the horizon because, again, it's all about control. Once you have all these systems in place, it's very easy to integrate them. And of course, it's always for your own good. It's not because, it's because they want to control it. It's not really for your good, but that's what they're going to tell you. And people will buy it, as we've seen.
Mike, what was this called? Social scores or something like that? What is it?
Social credit scores. Yes.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Well, the whole thing was started in China. And of course, when the news hit the United States, all of the corporate data companies were, isn't that terrible? All the politicians were saying, isn't that terrible? Yeah. All the media, this is a terrible thing that they do in China. Secretly, though, they were sending teams of people over to China to see how they did it because they wanted to copy it. And that's exactly what they did. What we're building now was really pioneered in China, and it was developed under communism. And it's just another form of communism, if you want to call it that, which really is a variant. The real name to call it is collectivism. We have collectivism in the United States, and you can't tell the difference between our version of collectivism and China's version of collectivism, except for the name. The action is the same. So these are the things that we need to recognize in this new kind of warfare. We talk about warfare. We're at war. Well, we are. We say, well, it's different. Well, it is. Well, how is it different? Well, it's psychological. Well, what does that mean? That means the key phrase that you just mentioned. They sell it to us as being for our own good. Mm-hmm. That's how they beat us. It's done mentally, not physically with guns and weapons.
Yeah, this all fifth generation warfare, right?
Yes, exactly what it is.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, I got another question here. Can you explain the dangers, about the U.S. dollar and print? We could print money, right? People don't understand, when we print money and stuff and the debt and all this craziness. And then you got China, and I forgot what these other countries. I forgot what they call it. They're trying to move away from the U.S. dollar. Say if they were successful.
Oh, the BRICS.
Yeah, BRICS. Can you explain to the audience, if these other countries were ever to be successful to move away from the U.S. dollar, what is it going to happen to us, a country that prints money, and what happens to the values of us as individuals, our personal income, our property value? Could you please explain the dangers of that?
Yeah, that won't take long. We lose it all.
Yeah.
That's it. Next question.
Yeah, next question.
We lose it all because it's always comparative. But there's another hidden aspect of that. Again, we've got to climb up to that higher elevation and look down. These countries, we talk about them as though they're our foes, and they do act in many ways as though they're our enemies and our foes. And but what we have to realize is that this thing that they call the New World Order, this global governance thing that they're putting in place, a lot of people in our ranks are saying, yeah, they're getting close to that, aren't they? Someday they're going to have it. We got to stop that. We got to stop the New World Order. What they don't know is we've had it.
It's already here.
It's already here. It's been here ever since World War II came to an end.
Wow, really?
The liberal economic order.
Yes, the World Economic Order. And they've been talking collectivism in our own government just the same as in the Soviet Union or in Nazi Germany. It's the same lingo. They just have a different name for it. In this country, we call it deep state.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Our enemy is our citizens. Yeah. They're not wearing uniforms from another country. It's not China. It's not Iran. It's not Cuba. It's,
Yeah.
it's not Venezuela.
So I have a question for you.
It's not America either.
Yeah.
It's collectivism. And these people around the world are all following the same drum.
So I have a question that I think about this myself all the time. Exactly what you said. I never believed in the deep state until Trump. I thought preppers were whack jobs, right? And so these people that are part of, these government officials, the deep state, right, that are part, and I think it became apparent to all Americans what happened with Donald Trump. And I'm grateful that he lost that last election. You know why? Even though it was because of cheating, is that I don't think the visibility into how bad all the stuff that we're talking about was, the deep state, all that stuff. If Trump won back to back, he would not be able to have the ability, the power, and the support to do the things he's doing now, right? So it awakened a lot of people. But I don't know if you know the answer to this, right? Why are these deep state people that are quote Americans being part of this cabal of destroying America? Are they just evil people? Are they stupid? Are they being paid off? What do you think is driving that behavior that is really self-destructive to their children and grandchildren?
Oh, I think that's fairly easy to answer. We're trying to put their brains into the attitudes that we hold. Now, yeah, they don't think the way we do. They consider themselves to be enlightened. In fact, that's why some of them even perhaps call themselves the Illuminati, because they're enlightened. And they don't think of themselves as Americans. They may have American citizenship, or they may have Chinese citizenship or some other. But their real brain is thinking, we are citizens of the world. That's first. And that's the highest goal. That's the high road that they're taking. It's for the betterment of mankind, to put an end to wars, for example, or to make sure there are no starving groups anywhere in the world, and that we cure these dread diseases. And for that, we need ultimate power. Therefore, we need world power. And so we're doing this for the betterment of mankind. That's the argument. That's what they write the books about. Now, let's go back up in elevation again. The people that are at the heads of most of these subsections, if you look at their personal lives, and I mean really look at their personal lives, you find out that they are not moral people. They couldn't care less about what you and I care about. They are totalitarian in mindset. They want what is theirs. They want to be the king. They want to rule people. They want to have the power of life and death over everyone. Maybe in the back of their mind, they argue, well, that's for their own good. But deep down, they know, hey, that's for me, baby. I'm the chief here. It's that kind of a thing. And, it was Lord Acton that said power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. We quote him because the quote rolls off of our tongues. It sounds so good, but it's true. And if you understand that idea, you realize that any institution, whether it be government or corporates or church organizations or community, and whatever it is, anything that attracts a huge amount of money and influence over the activities of other people acts like a magnet and pulls toward it the predator class. Every suede shoe artist, every con artist in the world wants to work in the government, because that's their shield. They can put other people in prison. And anybody who tries to expose them as a criminal, it's the guy telling the truth that's going to wind up in prison if they work it right. And that's why all big governments and big institutions, you have to be suspicious. Not only suspicious, be convinced that a huge number of those people at the top, no matter how good actors they may be, they are corrupt, and they're there for the power. And, well, I like to tell that little story that you've probably heard. Was actually what I just said was gave me that idea came from Thomas Jefferson. Back in the day, I was doing some research and looking through the letters of Thomas Jefferson, and I came across a letter that he received from a doctor friend of his right after the Constitution had been written. And the doctor said, Mr. Jefferson, now that we have this new Constitution, how can we be sure that only good men are in office? That's the question, isn't it? Yeah. And Jefferson's answer was a little bit sharp but controlled. He said, "Let us speak not of good men in office. Rather, let us bind men down with the chains of the Constitution."
Yes.
And there it was, the whole picture crammed into one little sentence. In today's vernacular, Jefferson said, "Good men in public office? Are you kidding me?"
Yeah.
Are you crazy?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's what he was saying. We said we have to approach government as though it's loaded with criminals.
Oh my God.
Yes.
Because it will be. It will be. And
Yeah.
they'll be acting the good guys. So if we understand that, then we don't listen to what they say. We look at what they do or what they have done. We start being a little more skeptical about it. It's our obligation to our country to do that.
Yeah.
But Americans haven't learned that. They think that if a guy in office or running for office says the right thing and occasionally does the right thing, that's all we need to know. He's our man or woman. And that's part of this warfare, this psychological warfare that we are in today.
You know, what you just said about the politicians, and Mike knows this. People that watch the show know this. I had three segments of my life. In the early 20s, I got recruited by bad guys connected to the Chicago outfit. I changed my life. I got in trouble, paid my debt to society, went to college. I've been good for 35 years. Then I worked in corporate America, actually global corporate America, one of the biggest international consulting firms, which I'm not going to name, out of Paris, France, for 20 some years. And then I started getting into this politic aspect of my life, fighting for my kids, right? And then getting access, I became elected committeeman, which is not a big deal. But the first phase, right, you deal with bad people, right? Then when I got into corporate America, where these guys were highly educated and started in college and stuff, I'm like, wow, these guys are scumbags. They're just a little more educated and trickier how they backstab you. Now, in this last few years, the biggest scumbags, to your point, Mr. Griffin, are the politicians. They're the most untrustworthy scumbags, worse than the Chicago mob guys, by far. I'm not trying to glorify them. They're bad guys. You know what I mean? They did wrong things and stuff, and they're bad guys. But I would trust somebody in my inner circle much more than a politician that would tell me something, or even a corporate guy. And they're just a little more slicker in how they go about and try to do things in a deceptive way. And these are the people that are running our country and our corporations.
Right.
Well, I want to add one other thing to this real quick, too, because as we've seen, they continue to coalesce more and more power in D.C., which is what they want for more control. Anytime they do get caught or there's repercussions, we change the laws. Now the thing to do is move that out to NGOs, non-governmental organizations. They don't operate under the same restrictions that an elected official does. They can bypass the Constitution, which, to your point and Jefferson's point, the point of our Constitution isn't to give our government power, it's to restrict what they can do to victimize us, the people. And now they'll use non-governmental agencies to bypass that, or backdoor deals, calling Facebook or Twitter to block a story that's like, say, the Hunter Biden laptop, to discredit that, or we'll have intel agents sign off on a letter from a Hillary Clinton, but they're utilizing their power outside of government, so they can't be held responsible, or at least they think they can't be held responsible. That the point is, they want to get away from these restrictions to have total dominance and no repercussions when they violate our rights or violate the law. And we've seen a trend sliding more and more that direction, really, since the inception of our country.
I got a question for you. Speaking with Mike about NGOs and stuff, have you done any so I'm a Catholic. I was Southwest side of actually Italian and Polish, so both sides were Catholic, right? Have you done research on Catholic charities? And this is a loaded question because I'm very familiar with what they did here in Chicago and the country with the Venezuelans, and how they basically were the distribution arm for the cartels from the Mexican border to Chicago.
Uber for TDA.
So have you done, in all the things that you've done in your life and history around the NGOs, and specifically about Catholic charities, do you have an opinion on that?
Well, I've done nothing specific on it, but I have observed, as you just said, that the Catholic charities, the Protestant charities, any charity that's big, has a lot of money, different church organizations, regardless of the theology behind it, if you look, you're going to find corruption there because money corrupts. And a lot of money corrupts a lot. And that's just the way it is. So that's not a slur against any religion or anything. It's just that's what happens when all of these ideas become institutionalized by organizations with a bank account. Then the trouble begins. You know? So that's just, we have to be aware of that. And it's pointless to complain about it. We just have to be aware of it and protect ourselves against it. Like Jefferson said, bind men down with the chains of the Constitution, assume that they're going to be scoundrels, and you'll be much better off.
Yeah. You know, so when I first started fighting against the porn and stuff, the biggest supporters, and the guy, if you're watching, our grandfathers, they were Catholics, right? I used to go on Thursdays until we did our show on Tuesday and Thursdays. They would go to the oldest church in Illinois and read do the rosary for 4 years now because of what the direction that America's heading for their children and grandchildren, right? And they're all Catholics, and then like typical, mostly Irish Catholics would go drink afterwards after they do the rosary. And I'm like, guys, I go, what the heck is up, man? I go, you know, like I can't get your sons to stand up and defend your grandchildren. You know what I mean? You guys show up. What's up with the Catholic Church? All this craziness was starting to happen. You know, you guys used to you had the Crusaders out beheading Muslims. Now I can't get a dad to show up at the school to say porn doesn't belong in a school. And the Catholic Church and Catholic Charities is so corrupt. And they, you know, to your point, they're like, well, it's the leadership. It's not the followers. It's the top of the Catholic organization. But I'm like, you can't be silent. Your silence, you got to speak out. I mean, I know you're Catholics, you're devoted Catholics, right? But you guys got to say something, right? You can't just be silent and then say, oh, it's the guys on the top. So, you know, you can't blame the rest of us. But the silence is deafening.
Mm-hmm. Well, you're absolutely right. And once you break out of the matrix of being told that you have to trust anybody who's in authority, that's a big step for most people. It was big for me. And when I finally said to myself in the mirror, Ed, you have to start questioning authority, even though it's going to be controversial. And some people are not going to like you for that. And it might even be dangerous to your career or to your physical well-being. You got to stop accepting authority because it's generally not trustworthy. Yes. It's as simple as that. But most people are unable or have not yet come to the point to take that step. They want to believe that if there's somebody that's in the news or is described favorably in the news, that they're good guys. Yeah. Especially if they have the right enemies. You know, the old saying, it's the best enemy you can buy. So if you've got a candidate and you don't think much of him or her, in fact, you don't like him at all, but his opposition is horrible, you think, well, it's a lesser of two evils.
Right.
Yeah. That's a trick.
You're still voting for evil. Yeah.
That's one of the tricks in the warfare right now.
You brought up something over all the controversial books and subjects and lectures and movies you've done over your tremendous life story. Have there been any like threats or any people coming after you and targeting you like they do now? It's like a normal thing for somebody who's a nobody, let alone someone like yourself. Did you have any problems throughout your life?
Not really any serious problems. Little tinky things. In fact, I've often wondered why not, and I've been disappointed because literally, I'm not kidding. I think I'm not doing this right because nobody thinks I'm a threat, so I'm not loud enough or whatever it is. But the answer is no. I've had a couple of little things. I remember I did something exposing some chicanery behind the hiding behind the civil rights movement years and years ago. And I'm just telling you the truth about it, and I got a call from some black man. I could tell by the tone of his voice, and I think he identified himself. He said, "I'm coming to get you. I'm coming to get you." Or whatever. He was trying to threaten me over the phone. Now he thought I was against black people because I was exposing some crooks inside the civil rights movement. He couldn't separate those two things out, So, but that was it. He was all upset. I felt sorry for him, but a little bit spooky because sometimes people do get deranged and they could go up and kill somebody because they're filled with resentment and then maybe drink too much and off they go. Yeah. But that's about it. And let's see. About 15 years ago, I wrote something on the internet. I said, the day is coming when you may not have freedom of speech. You might be censored in what you can say on the internet. Well, I got a whole bunch of letters coming in and commentaries. Can you imagine Griffin said that in America, that you would never be able to say, express your opinion?
Yeah, well, look where we are today. Yeah, well,
Yeah.
better to be correct than better be correct and hated at the time than to have the thought to yourself, especially considering where we are today. I had one other question I wanted to ask you, and that was, we kind of talked about this a little bit off air. Early in Trump's term, I remember President Trump and Elon Musk kind of talking, almost joking around about going to the Federal Reserve and live streaming. Do you think any of the gold's still there in Fort Knox? Because right after they made those statements, that was the last time I heard about it.
Well, of course, it was never there. Well, I shouldn't say it was never there. It was there in the beginning, but I don't know when it disappeared, but it was a long, long time ago. And otherwise, they would have let people in to examine it. But they never let reporters in. They let nobody in. They had guards out there all the time as though they were guarding the gold. Actually, the guards were to keep the reporters out to discover that there was no gold inside.
Yeah,
that's what it was for. But anybody that understood what was going on wouldn't have known the truth of that. And I don't think highly of Mr. Trump and his friends for playing that game, because they know better. That was theater.
Yeah.
That was theater.
Yeah,
now, why they would do that, I don't know. But I get so tired of theater, and I want the truth. I just want the way it is.
Yeah, substance.
I have another. It's probably a little last conversation here because it's going to take a little while to answer. I watched another one of your shows from the '60s. It was black and white back when I was a baby, and you were talking about communism, right? And they're trying to get control and constraints on America, and get disruptive of the minorities, right? The African American community at the time, but they were a small minority in the Hispanics, and and then I remember hearing you say that the communists or Russians are too smart to know that minority population was too small at that time, right? Because they were quote the minority. Well, now fast forward what you said. Now that kind of flip flopped. So can you tell me, what are your thoughts about what you said, like in the '60s, and where we're at now with the communist influence in the Russia and China and trying? I mean, I think I know the answer, but you were seeing things happen real time from what you mentioned in the '60s and what's going on now and the possibility of what can happen.
Well, yeah, it's kind of a potpourri of different strategies all thrown into the pot at the same time. I'm trying to put my mind back to some of those communist brochures and organizational manuals that I read back in the day, and they had a lot of gears in the mechanism, and it basically boiled down to be flexible. That these are the things the levers you could push or the buttons you could push, and depending on circumstances and how it would turn out, you could do this or you could do that. But the whole idea was the important thing, is what the purpose of it was. The purpose was to get the people divided from each other, not only divided, but hating each other. And no matter how they would do that, whether it would be a minority population or whether they would try and do it on, they could always do it on the basis of class, the rich versus the poor, and they do that in most countries. But where they find a racial difference, especially if there's some problems there, or if they find a religious difference, that's what they will go for, because those are the things that people feel deeply emotional about, and they talk about playing on that, and if necessary, to actually assassinate or murder little black children or white children,
right,
and make it look like it was done by the opposite race, just to get the adults out into the streets killing each other, and that'll draw more attention. Than maybe they can turn that into civil war, and that they talked about that openly.
Oh yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make is that they didn't have any special plan always. They had several plans that could work depending on how things worked out. But once you understand that the whole goal was to divide and conquer, and not to solve any problems, but to create problems, not to build anything creative and constructive, but to destroy everything that was there, so that people would be desperate and looking for answers of how to survive. And then the government comes in and says, we will help you survive if you
Yes.
obey them.
They offer you the solution.
Yep.
Yeah. And that's really one of the other key takeaways there is we're dealing with a globalist enemy that is not constrained by morality or law or other things like we are. They're willing to cross whatever line they think they can get away with to further their goals and further their agenda. Whereas we're on the opposite end. We are a moral people. We're trying to operate legally to defeat this enemy. And it's going to be a never-ending fight. Because I think even if we were to defeat this globalist, uniparty, deep state, whatever you want to call them, it's only going to be a short matter of time before someone else steps up to fill their shoes.
Yeah, I would agree with that, except for one thing. You said we, on the other hand, are moral people and so forth. I think that's true of the general population.
Yeah.
But when it comes to our leadership, it ain't true, if I may use that word. True. It's just the opposite. In fact, I find very little difference in morality between the opinion leaders, the decision makers, the real people at the top of that pyramid. They have no moral restrictions on their actions whatsoever. And they would gladly murder half the population of the world if it served their purpose.
Yes. I lied. I got one more question. Have you done any research on Antifa and the dangers of Antifa and what's going on, how they're being backed in the United States of America to do some of the things that we're talking about today?
Well, yes, I have. Antifa is just another one of the typical, what we used to call the Communist Front. There's a front organization, is what they called it, because they dealt with it as though it was a military front, like a war front, and they called it the local domestic fronts, and then you have a racial front, and you'd have an economic front, a religious front, and so forth. And they'd form little organizations that would appear to be driven by popular support, but actually were really always financed and organized from behind the scenes by some Soviet connection or maybe some other thing too. But it was never spontaneous. It was never the real thing. It was an orchestrated, created mechanism of warfare. And the whole purpose was to agitate and to aggravate different segments of the population so that they become angry with each other and then finally hostile to each other and finally murderous toward each other, and they start destroying things. And that's what it's all about, always has been. And Antifa has no different than that. And when you take a look at the ideology of communism and fascism, what's the difference? There is no difference. Yes. I've studied both of those in length. I've made charts of the left believes in this, the right believes in that. Check, 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 check. Mm-hmm. All the principles are the same. Now they may differ as to who their hate objects are. Mm-hmm. Like the communists hated the Jews. In Russia they went after the Jews, and of course the Nazis went after the Jews too. But I go backward. I said that wrong. In Russia, the primary enemy in the Soviet Union was the rich people, the ruling class, the capitalists. It was the capitalists against the working class. But in Germany, of course, it was the Jews. And in some places around the world, it was Christianity against the Jews or against the Arabs and the Muslims or something. They were always looking for wherever the crack was visible, they would go to work on that crack. But other than that, what they believed in was the same. But when I say what they believed in, I'm talking about their principles. And the overriding principle of collectivism is this: the group is more important than the individual. Mm-hmm. And the individual must be sacrificed, if necessary, for the greater good of the greater number. Mm-hmm. You will find that at the core of all of these collectivist systems. Mm-hmm. Fascism is the same as Nazism and communism and socialism and New Dealism, and even in our world, Americanism to many people. That's what they believe. I venture if you were to do a poll and ask Americans at random if they believe what I just said is a valid principle that they would support, 99% of the population would say yes. So we're already convinced to be collectivists. We've been taught that that's the right ideal. Yeah. We only have a problem when we put a name to it. Oh, that's communism. We would never go for communism. But that is what we are going for under a different name. Yeah. So we got to get rid of these names and start talking about the real essence of the ideologies. It's collectivism on the one side and individualism on the other side. If we start using the right names, then we have a chance at winning this war. But if we think it's communist versus fascist, or right wing against left wing, or Republicans versus Democrats, we lose.
Yeah, no, that you're right. And to your point about the investments and stuff, me and my buddy Ben Berquam, he works with Steve Bannon. We were at the DNC. I dressed up as like an old man Antifa. we were in the midst of the Hamas, the praise, and they had somebody dump off these signs that were all professionally, hundreds of them, in the middle of their camp. Right. I just was at the one of their protests against Christie, was it Nome or whatever?
Christie Nome, yeah,
over here by my house. They all had these professional signs again. To your point, they're the same people. They're shipping them around, and it's an organized, controlled, bought off to give a bigger impression of what they really are. So I don't know. I'd love talking to you. We got an hour of your time. We want to be respectful of that. You're like a walking, talking documentary. I could talk to you forever. And I really appreciate you being on the show. I don't know, Mike, if you have any other comments you want to say, or
Well, I just want to say, thank you again for joining us tonight. And Terry, to your point, this Crowds on Demand CEO said he's had a 400% increase in them using rent-a-mobs just in DC in the last few months. So we know this is where a lot of it comes from. We know they were draining money from USAID and other government entities to fund these organized grassroots protests. But yeah, it's about creating the illusion that they have popular support when they don't. And Mr. Griffin, I want to thank you for spending so much time with us tonight and sharing your knowledge. We'd love to have you back on again. Like I said earlier, you're a personal hero of mine. I think you've done so much work to wake people up on such a wide variety of issues. And last thing, any words of wisdom you'd like to leave our audience with?
Words of wisdom. Well, let's see. I think I have 3 words of wisdom that are kind of very close to my heart. And they're this. First, question authority.
Yes.
Second, respect nature. And third, be true to your convictions no matter what the opposition is.
Well said.
Very good. Very good. So we're going to close out the show right now. Hold on. Mike, what's going on? What's on the agenda?
Almost forgot. Yes, we have a very special episode coming up this Thursday. You're going to be out there on a secret assignment. So Mickey and I are going to be hosting. We got a wide variety of people joining us. Emily Cahill, Noah Herod, Jim. Sorry, Jim, I'm forgetting your last name, and others. Sorry,
Lehan.
Sorry, Jim.
Mickey Scornavaco.
Yes. So we've got a great show lined up Thursday. Make sure you join us. There's going to be some surprises and there's going to be some fireworks. And then I guess otherwise to our audience, I want to say thank you for joining us tonight. Please like, share, and subscribe. Help us to grow so we can bring more people the news the mainstream media doesn't want you to hear. And make sure that